Welcome to Education Wave Success Made Easy, Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants. In this video, you are going to learn these topics. So the first is type of flowers. There are two type of flowers. One is clistogamous. In clistogamous, the anthers and the stigma lie close to each other. And how they are close to each other? Because the flower, they never sprout. They remain at bud state, and inside this bud you will see that there are anthers, and inside it there is a female reproductive organ of this flower. And inside this state, inside the flower, the pollination takes place. So when anthers dehiscence in the flower bud, pollen grains come directly in contact with the stigma and they affect pollination. So there is no chance of cross pollination. So you can say that they barely achieve self pollination, right? They do not require any agent. They do not require any dealers of pollination, or you could say agents for pollination. What are these agents for pollination? You might need insects, or you might need wind, water. These are the agents for pollination to occur. They do not require any such thing because they are lying very close to each other in a closed state. So no cross pollination could take place, right? So this is our clistogamous flower, and you could see that these are our bud state flower, and inside these bud, you could see the anther or you will see the stigma. Okay. Now, chasmogamous flowers, they are exact opposite of the clistogamous flowers. They are exposed, like they have anthers. Here, the anther will be exposed, the stigma will be exposed. So, any pollen grain could come and it will land here and it will fertilize it, or the pollination could occur. Okay, so cross pollination chances are very high in chasmogamous flowers. And of course, we need pollination, or you could say pollinating dealers, agents. We do really need them, pollination dealers, since they are generally cross pollinating. So we need that. Okay, this is what chasmogamous flower and plestogamous flower. Now, pollination. What is this pollination? Transfer of pollen grains. For example, this is my stigma. So what? The landing of the pollen grains on the stigma, right? So this is what our pollination means. Transfer of pollen grains to the stigma of a pistil is termed pollination. Now, this kind of pollination is of three types. So first is autogamy, zytogamy, and xenogamy. Now, this autogamy means the fertilization of a flower by pollen from the same flower. For example, this is the flower, okay, and this flower will be fertilized by its anther. Okay, the pollen of this same flower will land on the stigma of the same flower. Okay, so within the same flower, this autogamy occurs. Transfer of pollen grains from the anthers to the stigma of the same flower. And this is called self pollination, right? Now, zytogamy is transfer of pollen grains from the anther of to the stigma of another flower. It means plant remains same. If it is the plant of, let's say, corn, right? So the anthers, for example, this is my flower. Anthers of this flower will reach on the stigma of this flower. So transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma of another flower. Okay, flowers might differ, but the plant remains same. So genetically similar to autogamy, but here two different flowers are involved. So functionally the cross pollination is occurring, but there will be no genetic variations because the flower is same, the genes are same, right? So no genetic variations will be seen here. Okay, so they maintain the parental characters. Now, corn is the perfect example for this. And here you could say the sunflowers, they do autogamy, or orchids. Okay, now xenogamy, this is very easy because there are two different type of plants involved. So the pollen of this plant might land on the stigma of the flower of this plant. So there are two different plants involved. Here the single flower was involved, the plant was same. Here also the plant was same, but there are two different flowers were involved. Now here two different plants are involved. So this is only type of pollination which during pollination brings genetically different type of pollen grains to the stigma. Because of course they both got their different genes, right? They both are genetically different. So in xenogamy, you will say that they produce genetically modified offsprings, right? So example of it might be broccoli. Now, agents of pollination, like I said, there are so many different kind of agents involved during pollination. For clistogamous, you might not need agents. But for gasmogamous flowers, you might need what? You might need agents. So there are two different type of agents involved. First is abiotic and biotic, the two different type of agents of pollination. So in abiotic, you will see wind and water are seen as abiotic agents of pollination. And for biotic, living organism, this could be anything like any animal or insect involved here. Now, you will see during wind or water pollination, you will see the flower will show no colored pattern, right? They do not show any attractive colors or scent, no nectar, because they do not need to attract anything, right? Wind will go on its own, water will go on its own. But for animals to attract these flowers, in which the pollination occurs by animals, or insect pollination occur, or any animal pollination, birds pollination occur, to attract them they might need colorful petals, they might need nectar, right? They might need aroma. Let's see, pollination by wind. What happens when there is a pollination which occurs by wind? So pollen grains are very light and non-sticky, so they can be transported in wind current. They not need to be very heavy because wind will carry it. So wind to for wind to carry it, it needs to be light and also non-sticky. Otherwise, it will stick to any surface, right? So you see these kinds of feathers, these are pollen grains, and you could see that they are very light and they are also looking very non-sticky. It will not stick on anything, so that they could be easily transported in wind currents. They often possess well exposed stamens. So you could see that this is well exposed stamens, so that the pollens are easily dispersed into wind currents and large, often feathery stigma. The flowers which are pollinated by wind have very feathery stigma, so that the airborne pollen grains could be easily trapped here. Right? If the surface is going to be very smooth, it will not be able to trap anything. But if it is rough, if it is often, very feathery, it will be easy for the stigma to trap things, right? So during pollination, you will see so many different kinds of things. If it is pollinated by wind, you will see different kinds of adaptations by these pollen grains or stamens. Okay, wind pollinated flowers often have a single ovule in each ovary. Wow, so they have only single ovule in each ovary, but there are numerous flowers packed into an inflorescence. A familiar example is corn. See, you will see a corn plant and anthers, the male gametophyte is just above it. And these are the female gametophytes, right? So the anthers reach here. So this is a perfect example of zytogamy, right? The flowers or the anthers of the same flower, it pollinates the female gametophyte of the same plant but different flower, right? These are nothing but the stigma. and style which wave in the wind to trap pollen grains. So this tassel thing is to what? To trap pollen grains. Okay, which wave in the wind to trap pollen grains. And wind pollination is quite common in grasses. So this is the pollination by wind. Okay, I hope you understand. Please subscribe to my channel. I'll appreciate and thank you so much. Comment and like.